This video explores the full story of the James Bond film series, from its origins to its global legacy. Who is James Bond? Just a fictional spy, or something much bigger? In this video, we dive deep into the legend of 007, from the man who created him, Ian Fleming, to the actors who wore the tuxedo and made history. You'll discover how Bond was born, how he changed, and why he still thrills millions today. What made Sean Connery the original icon? Why did Daniel Craig's Bond break all the rules? And what are the most unforgettable Bond films ever made?
Bond, James Bond.
This isn't just a story of cinema, it's the rise, fall, and rebirth of a global legend. Welcome to the world of James Bond.
Let's get started.
Chapter 1. Before the Martini, the origins of a legend before the gun barrels and tuxedos. Before the exotic cars, explosive gadgets, and shaken martinis, before he ever said Bond. James Bond, there was only a desk, a typewriter, a cigarette burning in a silver ashtray, and the mind of one man. It's hard to imagine today, but once upon a time, James Bond didn't exist. He wasn't yet the cinematic icon. He wasn't a household name. He wasn't even fictional, not yet. In this chapter, we step into the world before Bond, before the books, before the fame, before the billion-dollar franchise. We peel back the pages of time and uncover the quiet moment, a man, a beach house in Jamaica, a war-scarred memory, and an idea that would soon become unstoppable. A world at war, and the seeds of fiction. The year was 1952. The ashes of World War II still lingered in the minds of millions. The Cold War was beginning to freeze the world into camps of fear and mistrust. Espionage wasn't a fantasy, it was the silent battle that governed global politics. Spies were real, their missions deadly, and their presence invisible. Amidst this chaotic post-war tension, a former British intelligence officer named Ian Fleming was staying at his Jamaican estate, aptly named Goldeneye. He had spent years serving in British naval intelligence during World War II. He had seen things, dangerous things. He had known real spies, sent real men to die, and crafted real missions that changed the course of real battles. But now, he wanted to create something fictional, not to escape reality, but to reshape it. To write a version of the world where the good guys smoked cigarettes, seduced beautiful women, drank too much, and still saved the world before breakfast. The birthplace of a spy, Goldeneye, wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary. Perched above a cliff with a view of the Caribbean Sea, it was isolated, sun-soaked, and silent. Fleming built it with a simple purpose: to write. Every morning, he would wake at 6 a.m., swim in the sea, eat a light breakfast, and then sit down to write for 3 hours, no more, no less. And on one of those days, in that 3-hour window, he typed a sentence: "The scent and smoke and sweat of a casino are nauseating at 3 in the morning." With that opening line, James Bond was born. The power of a name. You might think the name James Bond was carefully constructed, stylish, strong, symbolic, but it wasn't. Fleming famously borrowed the name from a birdwatching book he had lying around, A Birds of the West Indies, by a man named Dr. James Bond. He once explained, "I wanted the simplest, dullest, plainest sounding name I could find. James Bond was much better." Then something interesting. It's a brief, unromantic, a blunt, as Fleming often called him. Why write a spy? Anglo-Saxon name. It was identity. Fleming had lived a life surrounded by secrets, by courage, by this was part of the genius. Bond wasn't supposed to be larger than life at first, but he was not the one taking the shots. He was not on the front lines. He was supposed to be the man no one notices, the agent who slips into rooms without being remembered. Instrument. So, why did Ian Fleming write Bond in the first place? On the surface, boredom. An unlikely success. He was newly engaged and wanted to distract himself before marriage. Word spread. Fleming had touched on something primal. The first Bond novel was published in 1953. The reviews, mixed, the sales. But around the world, modest, the vision, clear, but beneath that, danger. James Bond was the version of himself he wished he could be: cooler, braver, less burdened by doubt. Bond was a fantasy wrapped in realism, a spy with flaws. He drank too much, smoked constantly, fell for the wrong women, and killed without hesitation, mistrusted authority. And that's what made him human. Readers recognized the darkness in Bond, and they loved him for it. Casino Royale, But something happened. People talked. President John F. Kennedy, who named from Russia with love one of his power, lust, but here, in this quiet beginning in the adventure, all in one cold, brilliant man, fear. By the time Fleming wrote his second and third books, Live and Let Die and Moonraker, Bond was gaining fans, not just in Britain, one of those fans. Favorite books in 1961, that endorsement launched Bond into international stardom. The beginning of a cultural empire. It would still be a decade before Bond hit the silver screen. Cigarette haze of Fleming's Jamaican retreat, a cultural juggernaut was born. Bond wasn't just a man, he was an idea, a fantasy of power during a time of uncertainty. A weapon of escapism, dressed in a suit, driving an Aston Martin. Final lines of the chapter. So before we meet the actors, before the theme songs and the gadgets, before the explosions and car chases, remember this. James Bond started as a man on a typewriter, trying to process his own past, his war-scarred mind, and the fragility of masculinity in a world that demanded toughness. He gave the world a spy who bled, who smoked, who flirted, who killed, and who, in doing so, became eternal. Chapter 2. Ian Fleming's life, childhood, career, and secrets. Narration begins before James Bond ever held a gun, before MI6 briefings and Aston Martins, before the first martini was ever shaken, not stirred. There was Ian Lancaster Fleming. A man born into privilege, a man raised by war. A man haunted by shadows of expectation, secrecy, and loss. And ultimately a man who would give birth to one of the greatest icons in fictional history. This is the story of the creator. The man behind 007, Chapter 2.1. The boy born into power. Ian Fleming was born on May 28, 1908, in Mayfair, London, into a world already paved with influence and legacy. His father, Valentine Fleming, was a member of Parliament, a war hero, a patriot, and a friend of Winston Churchill. His mother, Evelyn St. Croix Fleming, came from Scottish aristocracy. They weren't just wealthy, they were powerful. From a young age, Ian was told he would be someone important. But that pressure, it created cracks early. When Ian was just 9 years old, his father was killed in World War I on the Western Front. It was a death that shook him. Churchill himself wrote Valentine's obituary in the Times, a rare gesture that only deepened the myth around his father. Ian was now a boy without a hero, yet expected to live like one. Chapter 2.2. Education, Rebellion, and Restlessness. Ian's education was elite, but turbulent. He was charming, yes, but also rebellious, sarcastic, and restless. He was sent to Eton College, the training ground of British leaders. He excelled in sports and languages, but struggled with authority. After a scandal involving girls and mischief, his mother pulled him from Eton and sent him to the Royal Military College at Sandhurst. But Ian hated it. He wanted freedom, language, literature, travel. The rigid structure, the drills, the shouting, it wasn't for him. He left without a commission and was soon sent to a private school in Kitzbühel, Austria, where he learned German, French, and how to ski like a professional. Later, he studied briefly at Munich University and the University of Geneva, where he had his first serious romance with a Swiss girl named Monique Pancho de Bottens. It didn't last, but it showed a pattern. Ian Fleming fell hard, fast, and often. Women would become both his escape and his obsession, just like Bond. Chapter 2.3. The failed banker. The curious reporter in his 20s, Fleming bounced between jobs. He tried banking and failed, tried stockbroking and hated it. Eventually, he found something that excited him: journalism. He became a correspondent for Reuters, reporting from places like Moscow and Berlin in the 1930s. He interviewed spies, watched trials, felt the tension in pre-war Europe firsthand. In Moscow, he witnessed Stalin's coldness. In Berlin, he sensed the storm of Hitler's rise. He wasn't just reporting. He was absorbing atmosphere, setting the stage for future fiction. He was fascinated by codes, disguises, and secrets. This was fertile ground for the mind of a storyteller. Chapter 2.4. The spy who didn't spy but planned the spying. In 1939, as Europe braced for another world war, Ian Fleming was recruited by Britain's Naval Intelligence Division. He rose to the rank of commander. Yes, like Bondan became the assistant to Admiral John Godfrey, the real-life M. His job wasn't to carry out missions, but to invent them. He planned Operation GoldenEye, a secret contingency plan to defend Gibraltar. He helped devise Operation Mincemeat, a deception strategy involving a dead body carrying false documents, a real-life spy story so unbelievable it later inspired books and films. Fleming wasn't James Bond, but he knew James Bond. He dined with double agents. He read classified files. He recruited saboteurs. He once oversaw a team of commandos who carried out silent assassinations behind enemy lines. All of this became material, real ingredients for a fictional spy. Chapter 2.5 Love, Lust, and Pain. Fleming had a complicated love life. He was a notorious womanizer, charming, witty, and arrogant. He had affairs across Europe, seduced married women, and refused to settle down. But then came in Charteris, the wife of a nobleman. They had a long, scandalous affair that only became legal after her husband died during World War II. They married, but never found peace. Undisapproved of his drinking, smoking, and constant affairs. He found her controlling and cold. Their marriage was a cold war of its own. Fleming poured much of that pain and those passions into his characters. Vesper Lynd, Honey Rider, Pussy Galore. Every Bond girl was, in some way, a reflection of the women in his life, desirable, dangerous, and doomed. Chapter 2.6 The GoldenEye Retreat. During the war, Fleming discovered Jamaica. After the war, he bought land there and built a house, GoldenEye. This was more than a vacation spot, it was his escape. Every year, he returned to write, swim, drink, and disconnect from British society. It was here, in 1952, on the eve of his marriage to Anne, that he began writing Casino Royale. He typed it on a gold-plated typewriter, a gift. 3 hours every morning, no edits, just words pouring out. By the end of the trip, he had completed his first novel. A new chapter in his life had begun. Chapter 2.7 The Mind of a Contradiction. Ian Fleming was many things, a lover of fine food, tailored suits, and brutal honesty. A man who smoked 70 cigarettes a day and drank like it was oxygen. A nationalist who distrusted politics, a fantasist grounded in reality. A man who both loved and hated what Bond represented. He was also deeply insecure. He once said, "I am not a good writer. I'm just a better liar than most." But those lies. They created a character so convincing that people wanted to be him. Chapter 2.8 Death of the creator. Ian Fleming died on August 12, 1964, of a heart attack, at just 56 years old. He left behind a grieving wife, a young son, and a global empire in the making. By the time of his death, he had written 12 Bond novels and 2 short story collections. Bond had already appeared on screen in Dr. No and From Russia with Love. The literary and cinematic world had already begun to transform, but Fleming wouldn't live to see the full explosion of what he created. He had unleashed the spy, but never witnessed the legend. Closing narration of the chapter. So who was Ian Fleming? A patriot, a spy, a lover, a liar, a broken man with a brilliant pen. He was everything Bond was, and everything Bond wasn't. And somewhere in the middle of truth and fiction, 007 was born. Chapter 3 How Ian Fleming's life shaped the character of James Bond. Narration begins. If Ian Fleming gave birth to James Bond with a typewriter, then the soul of Bond came from within him. James Bond wasn't just imagined, he was distilled drop by drop from Fleming's own personality, fears, desires, and disappointments. To understand Bond, you must understand the man behind him, not just the author. The veteran, the lover, the loner, the snob, the drinker, the spy who never pulled a trigger but knew the cost of silence. This chapter isn't about how Bond began, it's about why he began. Chapter 3.1 A Man and His Mirror. It's tempting to think of James Bond as pure fiction, a fantasy stitched together from suave charm, British patriotism, and Cold War anxiety, but Bond was much more than that. He was a version of Ian Fleming himself, a mirror, carefully cracked, reflecting an idealized man of action, free from the weight of real-world responsibility. Fleming once described Bond as a blunt instrument. But when you look closer, that instrument is sharpened with Fleming's own vices and virtues. He didn't invent Bond, he sculpted him out of cigarette smoke, bourbon breath, and unspoken regret. Chapter 3. To the vices, smoking, drinking, and women. Bond smokes around 70 cigarettes a day in the novels. So did Fleming. Bond drinks heavily and can stamp them artists, bourbon, scotch, champagne. So did Fleming. Bond is a relentless womanizer, often entangled with beautiful, dangerous women, usually ending in betrayal or heartbreak. So was Fleming. These aren't coincidental character traits. They are deliberate self-insertion marks of a man who lived on the edge, if only in his mind. Fleming once said, "Bond is what every man would like to be, and what every woman would like between her sheets." He said it with arrogance, but also with irony. Fleming knew Bond was flawed. He designed him to be thrilling, not moral. Chapter 3.3 The Psychology of Escape. Fleming's life was filled with pressure. The loss of his father at a young age, the demands of aristocracy, the failures at Eton, Sandhurst, and banking the burden of being someone important, so Bond became a form of revenge. Not against people, but against limitation, Bond travels where he pleases. Kills without guilt, sleeps with who he wants. Takes orders, but breaks rules, and always survives. He is what Fleming couldn't be, in a world that Fleming couldn't control. Bond, in a way, was his ultimate fantasy of freedom. Chapter 3. For the clothes, the cars, the class. Fleming was a style purist. He wore custom suits, collected rare books, and dined in exclusive clubs. He detested bad taste, cheap fabrics, and poorly dressed people. Bond followed suit literally, so naturally. Bond's fashion isn't just elegant seats a shield. An armor that lets him walk among the elite without ever truly belonging. Fleming understood that. Despite his wealth, he always felt slightly out of place among the true British nobility. His mother's dominance, his father's absence, and his own perceived mediocrity haunted him. Bond is confident. Fleming often wasn't, so he gave Bond what he lacked: certainty. Chapter 3.5 Violence, Duty, and Death. Fleming never killed a man. But he sent men to die. In naval intelligence, he planned missions that sent agents behind enemy lines. He lived with the consequences. He read the debriefs. He knew the price. That cold detachment, that sense of someone has to do the dirty work, is stamped all over Bond. Bond doesn't kill for joy. He kills because it's his job, and Fleming needed to believe that jobs like Bond's morally gray, yet necessary were real and righteous. This was especially important during the Cold War, when the enemy was invisible and ethics were foggy. Bond became the man who navigates the fog. Confident, efficient, silent, just like Fleming wished he could be. Chapter 3.6 The women he loved and lost. Fleming's relationship with women was a maze of charm, control, insecurity, and heartbreak. He was drawn to strong, intelligent women, but also resented losing power in romantic relationships. In Enchantress, his longtime mistress and eventual wife, he found both desire and disdain. They argued constantly. She disapproved of his drinking, his writing, his affairs. Their relationship was a war of class, culture, and ego. Bond reflects this dynamic. His lovers are often mysterious, independent, and tragic. Vesper Lind, the first Bond girl, betrays him and dies. Others seduce, deceive, or die in his arms. Bond is cursed with intimacy, just like Fleming. His love always ends in loss. Chapter 3.7 Obsession with Identity. Fleming was obsessed with what it meant to be a man. A man in war, a man in love, a man in Britain, a man without emotion. Bond is an attempt to answer that question. He's hypermasculine, yet emotionally broken. He's elegant, yet ruthless. He's elite, yet orphaned. Just like Fleming, who was constantly balancing contradictions. Fleming wanted to create a man who could be a killer and a connoisseur, a gentleman and a brute, a lover and a loner. And in doing so, he gave us one of the most complex archetypes in modern fiction. Chapter 3.8 The era in his blood. Fleming's Bond is a product of time. He's born in the post-war trauma, raised in the Cold War paranoia, living in a Britain that was losing its empire. Fleming was deeply aware of this transition. Bond isn't just a man. He's a symbol, a desperate attempt to prove Britain still mattered, still led, still dominated. Fleming crafted Bond to represent British dominance, even as history quietly removed it. It was patriotic fiction, disguised as personal therapy. Chapter 3.9 The blunt instrument. In Fleming's own words, James Bond is not a hero. He's a dull instrument wielded by a government department. He's not a detective. He's a man of action. But in truth, Bond is much more. He's an ekuphor of regret, of fantasy, of Fleming's soul. The scars in Bond's story: betrayal, trauma, emotional numbness were never truly about espionage, they were about Fleming himself. Bond was how he processed pain, how he coped with failure, how he rewrote his life in better clothes, with bolder endings. Chapter 3.10 Final Reflections. James Bond may seem like a man of confidence and control. But beneath the martini and the gun lies a man in pieces. That man was Ian Fleming. His habits, his wounds, his contradictions didn't just shape Bond, they were Bond. So the next time Bond walks into a casino, seduces a stranger, kills without blinking, or drives off into the night, know that behind him, in the shadows, stands a man with a typewriter. Typing not what he imagined, but what he could never be. Chapter 4. The birth of Casino Royale and the literary genesis of James Bond narration begins. It began with a sentence. Not a mission, not a gunshot, not a seduction. Just a sentence. The scent and smoke and sweat of a casino are nauseating at 3 in the morning. That line would ignite one of the greatest literary and cinematic franchises in human history. But in 1952, it was typed by a man who had no confidence in his writing, no grand plan, and no idea that the name James Bond would one day be spoken in more than 50 languages. This is the story of Casino Royale, the first step of 007, a novel born in paradise, written out of insecurity, and shaped by war, vice, and fantasy. Chapter 4.1 GoldenEye, a house with a mission. GoldenEye Fleming's Jamaican estate was no ordinary writing retreat. It was raw, quiet, and untouched by tourists. He dreaded marriage. He feared losing freedom. And so, in his own words, no phones, no distractions. No noise, just waves crashing into the coral reef below. It was here, on the edge of the Caribbean, that Fleming sat down in February 1952, just weeks before marrying in Charteris. I decided to write a thriller, to take my mind off the dreadful prospect of getting married. Every morning at 9 a.m., Fleming would sit at his desk, cigarette in mouth, and type for exactly 3 hours, no rewrites, no second thoughts. By the end of March, Casino Royale was done. Chapter 4.2 Why Casino Royale? Fleming had no literary ambitions. He didn't dream of prizes or critics. He just wanted to create something personal, and so, instead of inventing a hero from scratch, he wrote from memory, experience, and fantasy. A spy, like the men he met in naval intelligence, a villain, like the ones he imagined behind Nazi operations, a mission, like the ones he planned but never executed, a woman, like the ones he loved, lost, and didn't understand. Bond wasn't perfect, but that was the point. He was fast, brutal, handsome, cold, and damaged. Just enough mystery to intrigue, just enough vulnerability to feel real. Chapter 4.3 The plot, simple, dangerous, brilliant. The story is deceptively simple. British agent James Bond, newly promoted to 00 status, is sent to a fictional French casino in Royale-les-Eaux. His mission: defeat a communist operative named Lechiffer in a high-stakes game of baccarat to bankrupt him. If Lechiffer loses, he dies at the hands of his Soviet overlords. If Bond loses, British prestige and strategy crumble. The story unfolds with tension, elegance, and blood. There's torture, betrayal, a love story, and finally a suicide that rips Bond's emotional armor apart. Chapter 4.4 You enter Vesper Lynd. She's smart. She's elegant, she's mysterious, and she's a traitor. Vesper Lynd is the first Bond girl and arguably the template for everyone that followed. She's not just a love interest. She's an emotional challenge. Bond lets his guard down. He almost dreams of a future, and then it collapses. She's a double agent, blackmailed by Soviet agents. She takes her own life, leaving a confession behind. Bond is destroyed not physically, but emotionally. And in that moment, we hear the words that define his future. The bitch is dead now. It's cruel. It's raw. It's real. From this point forward, Bond is different. Love is a liability. Pain is permanent. Duty comes first. Chapter 4.5 Violence and the cold brutality of spy work. Casino Royale is not glamorous. There are no exploding pens or invisible cars. Bond is tortured with a carpet beater, naked, strapped to a chair, bleeding and broken. The pain is vivid, disturbing, and personal. This was Fleming's truth. Spying is not heroic. It is lonely, ugly, and thankless. Bond doesn't relish the job. He survives it. And that made him revolutionary for his time. Chapter 4.6. The style that shook British literature. Fleming's writing was unlike anything on the shelf in 1953. His prose was lean but luxurious. Detailed but fast-paced, he described food with more care than he described villains. He detailed the make and model of Bond's gun, the cut of his suits, the exact temperature of his martini. This obsession with precision gave the books a cinematic realism. You could see every room, smell every cigarette, hear every footstep. Critics called it sexist, brutal, and lowbrow, but readers, they couldn't get enough. Chapter 4.7. Reception. Modest beginnings. Massive Ripples. Casino Royale was published by Jonathan Cape in April 1953. The print run, just for 1,728 copies. It wasn't an immediate bestseller, but something happened. Journalists wrote about it. American publishers picked it up. The CIA took notice. President John F. Kennedy listed it as one of his favorite books in 1961. Suddenly, Bond wasn't just British. He was international, and Fleming kept writing. One novel a year, every year, until his death. Chapter 4.8. Bond's DNA, born fully formed. Even in the very first novel, Bond was complete. He smoked, drank, gambled, seduced, and killed. But more than that, he doubted, bled, lost. He was British, but global, elite, but brutal. A gentleman, but a killer. Fleming didn't evolve Bond gradually. He poured all of him into Bond from page one. Casino Royale isn't an origin story, it's a mission statement. Chapter 4.9. The delayed cinematic debut. Ironically, while the Bond books gained traction, Casino Royale wouldn't be adapted into a proper film for decades. The first adaptation was a 1954 American TV special where Bond was played by an American Barry Nelson, with Jimmy Bond fighting Les Chiffre. It was awkward, strange, forgettable. Fleming sold the film rights early and cheaply, something he later regretted. The proper Bond cinematic universe would begin later, with Dr. No in 1962, but make no mistake, Casino Royale is where it all began. Chapter 4.10. The foundation of a franchise. Every Bond film, book, comic, and game owes its spirit to Casino Royale. The balance of luxury and violence, the morally ambiguous protagonist, the tragic romance, the geopolitical paranoia, the lone agent with nothing to lose, but everything to protect. Without Casino Royale, Bond might never have been born. Or worse, he may have been born ordinary. Instead, he arrived scarred, stylish, and unforgettable. Final narration. So much of Bond's world, his pain, his pleasure, his loyalty, and his loneliness was shaped in this single novel. In Casino Royale, he isn't just a spy. He's a man learning what it means to trust, to lose, and to harden. It is here, in a fictional French casino, that a legend is made, not by gadgets, but by grief. And it all started ... with a single sentence. Chapter 5. The literary evolution of Bond. From Live and Let Die to the Man with the Golden Gun. Narration begins when Casino Royale was published in 1953. James Bond was born, not as a hero, but as a tool, a weapon of the British state. But Ian Fleming didn't stop there. Each year that followed, he added new layers: blood, betrayal, style, soul. Bond evolved, not just as a spy, but as a man. And in doing so, he became one of the most enduring characters in modern literature. This chapter explores that journey, from Live and Let Die to the Man with the Golden Gun. 12 years of stories. 12 books of transformation, one unforgettable icon. Chapter 5.1. Live and Let Die. 1954. The expansion begins. If Casino Royale was Bond's birth, Live and Let Die was his baptism by fire. In this second novel, Fleming moved the action to Harlem, Florida, and the Caribbean. The villain, Mr. Big, an African-American crime lord tied to the Soviet Secret Service. The mission: uncover gold smuggling and Soviet operations using voodoo as cover. Bond is tougher here, colder, more lethal. He's still shaken from Vesper's death, but hides it deeper. We also meet Solitaire, a psychic woman and Bond's new love interest, beautiful, mysterious, but again, an emotional accessory. What changed? Bond is now global. He's not just dealing with roulette tables and betrayals, he's fighting ideologies, confronting racism often problematically, and getting darker. Chapter 5.2. Moonraker. 1955. The domestic threat in Moonraker. Fleming shifts gears. The entire story happens in England. The villain, Sir Hugo Drax, a wealthy industrialist building a nuclear missile for Britain, or so it seems. Bond must investigate Drax's cheating at cards, only to uncover a Nazi conspiracy to destroy London. This novel focuses on intellect over action. There's less globetrotting, more dialogue, more psychological tension. It also shows a more human Bond. He struggles to connect emotionally. He considers a real relationship. He lets himself hope. And by the end, he's reminded, again, that hope is a liability. Chapter 5.3, Diamonds Are Forever, 1956, Glamour and Grit. Now Fleming brings Bond to Las Vegas, Sierra Leone, and New York. This novel dives into diamond smuggling, mafia operations, and corrupt Americana. Bond is stylish, yes, but also deeply alone. He partners with Tiffany Case, one of the more developed female leads. Their relationship is rocky, built on distrust and trauma. By this point, Bond is becoming more than a killer. He's a cultural observer. He notes the absurdity of American consumerism, the decay of European values, the emptiness of luxury. The story is more noir than spy thriller. And Bond, he's not just surviving, he's starting to understand himself. Chapter 5.4, From Russia with Love, 1957, Fleming's masterpiece. This was the turning point. Fleming crafted a novel so tight, so bold, it nearly redefined the genre. Most of the book doesn't even feature Bond. Instead, we follow Smersh, the Soviet agency planning to assassinate 007 to embarrass British intelligence. They use a honey trap, the beautiful Tatiana Romanova, and the psychotic killer Red Grant. Bond doesn't enter until halfway through. But when he does, he's elegant, charming, doomed. The climax is brutal. The train fight with Grant is legendary. The book ends with Bond apparently dying from poison. This was Fleming at his best, mixing espionage, politics, psychological tension, and sex. It was also JFK's favorite Bond book, which helped launch Bond's popularity in America. Chapter 5.5, Dr. No, 1958, and Goldfinger, 1959. The blockbuster blueprint. These two novels set the tone for what Bond would become in cinema. Exotic locations, eccentric, megalomaniacal villains, dangerous women, death-defying action. In Dr. No, Bond travels to Jamaica, Fleming's beloved GoldenEye home, battles a mad scientist, and escapes a deadly obstacle course underground. In Goldfinger, he uncovers a plot to irradiate Fort Knox's gold reserve. The villain is absurd, the stakes huge, and the Aston Martin appears. Bond becomes more mythic, less broken man, more British Superman. But Fleming balances the fantasy with grit. Bond still bleeds, still doubts, still fears. And he's always alone at the end. Chapter 5.6, A Thunderball, 1961. Lawsuits and Legacy. This novel almost didn't happen. Thunderball began as a failed screenplay collaboration between Fleming, Kevin McClory, and others. When Fleming turned it into a novel solo, legal battles erupted. But the book itself introduced a new enemy, Spectre, a criminal organization not tied to ideology, but to profit and power. The villain, Emilio Largo, a shark-loving millionaire stealing nuclear bombs. The story is cinematic, underwater battles, sharks, suspense, but it also marks a shift. Bond is more reactive, less personal. He's following orders, not revenge. Fleming was now writing for the screen, even if he didn't admit it. Chapter 5.7, The Spy Who Loved Me, 1962, The Feminine Perspective. This is Fleming's strangest novel. It's told entirely from the perspective of a woman, Vivian Michel, a Canadian motel worker who is attacked by thugs. Bond doesn't appear until 2/3 into the book. When he does, he's almost mythic, a rescuer, a storm, a force of nature. Fleming received backlash. Critics called it experimental failure, but it revealed something important. Fleming was trying to understand the effect Bond had on women, not just as lovers, but as symbols. It's raw, uneven, brave, and it shows that even at the peak of fame, Fleming was still experimenting. Chapter 5.8, You Only Live Twice, 1964. Grief and ghosts. By this point, Fleming was exhausted, his health was failing. His marriage strained, his fame overwhelming. This book follows Bond after the murder of his wife, Tracy, at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond is shattered, he drinks more, fails missions. MI6 considers retiring him. Then, they send him to Japan on a diplomatic mission. Blofeld, the man who killed his wife. There, Bond confronts Dr. Guntram Shatterhand, who turns out to be. Bond kills him in a samurai garden. Poetic, brutal, cold. But the novel ends with Bond losing his memory, living in a fishing village, unaware of his identity. It's Fleming's most emotional book, a man trying to escape grief, and failing. Chapter 5.9, The Man with the Golden Gun, 1965. A dying author's final blow. Fleming died before he could properly edit this novel. Bond returns to London after recovering from amnesia, only to be brainwashed by the Soviets and try to kill him. It's a chilling scene, and a metaphor. Bond is broken. The government nearly kills him. They recondition him and send him to Jamaica to kill Francisco Scaramanga, a deadly assassin, fading. The final duel is intense, but the book feels unfinished. Lacks polish, lacks soul. Fleming's health had deteriorated. His heart weak, his body tired, his spirit. This was his goodbye. He left Bond in the field, wounded, silent, uncertain. Chapter 5.10, Bond's Literary Legacy. From 1953 to 1964, Fleming created 12 novels to short story collections, a cultural titan. He wrote in bursts of pain, pleasure, paranoia, and patriotism. And in doing so, he didn't just define Bond, he defined the modern spy genre. Authors copied him, filmmakers adapted him, readers worshipped him. But over 12 years, that silhouette bled. And though later writers would continue the books, none captured Fleming's personal darkness. Final narration. The evolution of Bond across Fleming's novels mirrors the arc of a man, young and hopeful, confident and stylish, cynical and scarred, weary and tragic. Fleming once said Bond was a silhouette, a cipher. By the end, James Bond wasn't just a spy. He was Fleming's legacy, immortal, flawed, fascinating, and now, he was ready for the screen.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of 007, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more Bond fans find this video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and tell me in the comments. What did you think of this analysis, and what would you like to see next in the world of cinema or any other topic you're passionate about?
Chapter 6.1, Before Dr. No, the struggle for the screen. Fleming wanted Bond on screen early. In 1954, an episode of the American anthology TV series Climax. Awkward, clunky, forgotten, adapted Casino Royale. Bond was played by Barry Nelson, renamed Jimmy Bond. Fleming took the story and turned it into the novel Thunderball without properly crediting them. And made American. The result? Fleming wasn't happy. In the late 1950s, he worked on a screenplay with Kevin McClory and Jack Whittingham for an original Bond film. When that failed, this sparked a massive legal battle. Something big was coming. And eventually won partial film rights to Thunderball and elements like Spectre and Blofeld. To producers Albert R. Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman joined forces to bring Bond to the big screen. McClory sued. It would haunt the Bond franchise for decades. But despite the turbulence, Chapter 6.2, The Birth of Ian Productions in 1961, a rough-edged Scottish bodybuilder and former coffin polisher, was cast. Many, including Fleming, were skeptical. Spoke with confidence a mysterious villain, Dr. Julius No, the first Bond girl Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress, rising from the sea. Gadgets modest, but present, deadly charm, gun barrel sequence, that theme. And carried himself like a man who could kill you or charm you, sometimes both at once. He wasn't posh, he wasn't polished. Action-driven tale set in Jamaica. Dr. No 1962. The Big Bang No. They formed EON Productions and secured the rights to the Bond novels, excluding Casino Royale and Thunderball due to previous deals. Not from Russia with Love. Their choice for Bond's debut. Revolutionary. Not Casino Royale, charisma, danger, steel, but a modest. The budget, $1 million. The expectations, modest. The outcome. Chapter 6.3, Finding 007. The Sean Connery gamble. Fleming imagined Bond as someone like David Niven, a refined English gentleman. But he's damn good, so when Sean Connery. But Broccoli and Saltzman saw something else, sex appeal. No premiered in October 1962. Connery moved like a panther, Fleming later admitted. Chapter 6.4, Doctor, it had everything. Exotic locales, Jamaica. The film was a phenomenon. Audiences had never seen anything like it, especially in post-war Britain, which was craving identity, confidence, and style. Bond delivered all three. Chapter 6.5. From Fleming's Bond to cinematic Bond, there were differences, big ones. Literary Bond, introverted, cold, emotionally damaged, rarely smiled, more grounded in realism. Cinematic Bond, witty, unflinching, stylish, borderline superhero, charming even in the face of death. Connery's Bond was designed to entertain, not just to reflect Fleming's internal world. He kept the tuxedo, the martini, and the license to kill, but added something else, swagger, and audiences loved it. Chapter 6.6a. The explosion of a franchise after Dr. No. The machine was set in motion. From Russia with Love 1963, more serious, Cold War thriller. Goldfinger 1964, the template for Bond films, gadgets, supervillain, iconic theme. Thunderball 1965, bigger budget, underwater battles, box office juggernaut. You Only Live Twice 1967, spectacle in Japan, volcano layers, ninjas. Bond became not just a spy, but a brand. He influenced fashion, music, cars, politics, advertising, masculinity itself. In a world split by the Iron Curtain, Bond gave the West a fantasy of control. Chapter 6.7. The role of style and music. Bond's cinematic identity was defined by sound and image. The iconic Monty Norman theme, arranged by John Barry, became one of the most recognizable scores in film history. Each film also featured a title sequence full of silhouettes and symbolism, a theme song by pop stars eventually. Shirley Bassey, Paul McCartney, Adele. A dazzling blend of sex, violence, and art. Bond didn't just act. He moved with rhythm. He became a genre unto himself. Chapter 6.8. The reinvention of masculinity. Connery's Bond was alpha, but not cartoonish. He was stylish but brutal, sensitive only in whispers. In the 1960s, this model of masculinity struck a nerve. Post-war men saw in Bond power without politics, romance without consequences, adventure without responsibility. He drank what he wanted, slept with who he wanted, killed with cause, and always looked good doing it. He was, to many, the ideal man, and to others, a dangerous fantasy. Chapter 6.9. The limits of the fantasy. By the late 1960s, Connery grew tired. He felt trapped, typecast, underpaid. The pressures of global fame began to crack the illusion. After You Only Live Twice, Connery quit. Ian replaced him with George Lazenby for On Her Majesty's Secret Service 1969. The film was a critical success, but a box office dip. Lazenby quit after one movie. Connery returned for Diamonds Are Forever 1971. But it was clear, the original Bond era was ending. Still, the impact had been made. Bond wasn't just literature, he was now cinema history. Chapter 6.10. Fleming's response and legacy. Fleming lived to see only the first two films. He died in 1964, just after Goldfinger began production. But he saw enough to realize that Bond had outgrown him. The screen version was louder, sexier, more profitable, but the soul, still his. Fleming was proud and slightly jealous. But mostly, he was vindicated. His fantasy typed under Caribbean skies had become a global myth. Final narration. The leap from book to screen changed everything. James Bond went from literary spy to pop culture icon. The gun barrel, the tuxedo, the vodka martini. The one-liners, the explosions. They weren't just entertainment, they were language. Symbols of power, control, seduction, and escape. Bond didn't just enter cinema, he shaped it. And the man who once feared his wedding more than war ended up creating the most cinematic man of the century. All it took was a gun, a girl, and a camera. Chapter 7. The faces of 007. The actors behind the legend. Narration begins, the tuxedo changes. The voice deepens, the smirk sharpens, and the martini. Always shaken, never stirred, but beneath the tailored suits and silenced pistols, Bond has been many men, from Scotland to Australia, from Shakespearean actors to action icons. James Bond has worn many faces, but each one has carried the weight of the same legend. This is the story of the men who became Bond, how they were chosen, how they performed, how they endured or didn't, because to be Bond is to walk a razor's edge between fantasy and failure. Some rose, some stumbled, But all left their mark on 007 Chapter 7.1. Sean Connery. The original blueprint 196-196-719-71-1983. When Connery was cast, fans of the books were furious. He was Scottish, unrefined. A former bodybuilder, Ian Fleming, reportedly called him an overgrown stuntman. But then he spoke Bond, James Bond, and everything changed in Dr. No 1962. Connery was icy seductive and effortlessly dangerous. He could kill a man with his bare hands, then flirt with a woman moments later, and it never felt unnatural. He defined the cinematic Bond, stylish, cold-blooded, witty, physical, masculine to the extreme. He starred in 6 official films. Dr. No from Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, 1971 Return, and a non-Ian film, Never Say Never Again, 1983. An unofficial remake of Thunderball. Connery didn't just play Bond, he created the modern spy archetype. Too many. He is and always will be the definitive Bond. Chapter 7.2. George Lazenby, The One-Time Tragedy, 1969. An Australian model with no acting experience, George Lazenby was a gamble. But he landed the role with audacity, literally walking into the casting office in a tailored suit, Rolex watch, and faking his resume. He starred in just one film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service 1969, and it was incredible. Critically acclaimed, emotionally powerful, and cinematically daring, the film saw Bond fall in love, marry, and lose his wife. Lazenby's performance had moments of charm and awkwardness, but his final scene where Bond cradles his dead wife and says we have all the time in the world is devastating. So why did he quit? He feared the role would trap him. His agent told him Bond was old-fashioned. He walked away from millions. History proved otherwise. And while Lazenby never returned, his Bond left a lasting emotional scar on the franchise. Chapter 7.3. Roger Moore, The Gentleman Entertainer, 1973 to 1985. Where Connery was raw and animalistic, Roger Moore was silk and champagne. He debuted in Live and Let Die 1973 and continued through The Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, A View to a Kill. That's 7 films over 12 years, the longest Bond tenure. Moore's Bond was witty, playful, less violent, more gadget-heavy, often bordering on parody. He faced space lasers, voodoo cults, steel-toothed henchmen, and ridiculous one-liners. Critics were divided. Some found him too comedic, but audiences loved him. Moore brought Bond to a younger generation and made the franchise one of the biggest box office draws of the 1970s. Too many, especially those born in that era. He is their Bond. Chapter 7.4. Timothy Dalton, The Dark Realist 1987-1989. After Moore, the producers wanted something serious. Enter Timothy Dalton. Trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, Dalton dove into the Fleming novels. He wanted to bring back the psychological realism of the books. His Bond was brooding, loyal, romantic, intense, brutal when needed. He starred in The Living Daylights, 1987, License to Kill, 1989. The latter was particularly dark. Bond goes rogue to avenge a friend, and the tone is almost noir. But Dalton was ahead of his time. Audiences in the late 80s still wanted glamour and jokes. His films, while respected, now underperformed. Then a legal dispute delayed further movies, and Dalton eventually stepped down. Today he's often credited with paving the way for the Daniel Craig era. Chapter 7.5. Pierce Brosnan, The Slick Icon, 1995 to 2002. After a 6-year hiatus, Bond returned, and this time he had the perfect balance. Connery's charm, Moore's wit, Dalton's darkness. Pierce Brosnan was born for the role. He starred in GoldenEye, 1995, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, Die Another Day. GoldenEye revived the franchise, introduced a post-Cold War Bond, and featured a female M. Judi Dench, calling him a misogynistic dinosaur. Brosnan's Bond had emotionally charged action, high-tech gadgets, elegance, inner turmoil, especially in The World Is Not Enough. But as his tenure progressed, the films leaned into excess, invisible cars, over-the-top villains, weak CGI. Still, Brosnan's performance remained committed, suave, and layered. He was let go after 4 films, though many fans believe he deserved a better final script. Chapter 7.6. Daniel Craig, The Blunt Instrument, 2006 to 2021. When Craig was cast, the backlash was deafening. Too blonde, too rugged, too short, not Bond enough. But then came Casino Royale, 2006, and it reset the franchise. Craig's Bond was Physical, vulnerable, rage-filled, romantic, haunted. He didn't just wear the suit, he earned it his 5 films. Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, No Time to Die. This Bond bled, cried, loss, aged. In Skyfall he faced mortality, in Spectre he faced legacy, in No Time to Die he faced fatherhood and death. Craig's arc was the first complete Bond arc in film history. From rookie agent to self-sacrificing hero, he redefined what Bond could be, and for many became the greatest Bond of all. Chapter 7.7 What makes a great Bond? Every actor brought something different. Actor strengths, weaknesses. Connery, iconic masculinity, confidence, menace. Grew tired of the role. Lazenby, emotional vulnerability and experience. Poor timing, war charm, humor, accessibility. Lack of great campy tone. Dalton, depth, realism, literary accuracy. Misaligned with audience expectations. Brosnan, balance of style and Steele, weak scripts in later films. Craig, grit, emotion, realism, modern heroism. Some tonal inconsistency across films. There is no perfect Bond. Each reflects the era he served. Bond is a mirror of masculinity, of politics, of entertainment itself. Final narration. Behind the tuxedo is always a man. Behind the man is always a choice. Each actor who took the role of James Bond carried the weight of expectation and legend. Some were doubted, some were adored, all were remembered. They didn't just portray Bond, they shaped him, one smirk, one punch, one heartbreak at a time. And as one face fades, another steps forward, because Bond doesn't die, he evolves. Chapter 8 Bond by the numbers, awards, box office, and cultural impact. Narration begins. James Bond doesn't just shoot straight, he dominates charts. For over 6 decades, 007 hasn't just existed in film. He's led it in money, music, marketing, and mythology. This chapter explores the legacy of Bond in numbers, trophies, dollars, and influence. From glitzy Oscars to gritty criticisms, Bond's impact is global, measurable, and still growing. Chapter 8.1 The box office phenomenon. Since Dr. No 1962, Bond has been a consistent box office performer. As of 2021, the 25 official Bond films have grossed over $7 billion worldwide, making it one of the top 5 highest-grossing franchises in cinema history. Here's how the numbers evolved. Connery 196-67, $600 million plus per film. Moore 1973-85. $450 million per film. Brosnan 1995-02, $510 million per film. Craig 2006-21, $770 million per film. Biggest hits: Page 1, Skyfall 2012, $1.1 billion. Spectre 2015, $880 million. No Time to Die 2021, $774 million. Chapter 8.2 Budget versus Profit. Bond films didn't start big. Dr. No budget, $1 million. No Time to Die budget, over $250 million, but return on investment has always been strong. Marketing partnerships, global distribution, and product placement helped. Aston Martin DB5 sales spiked after Goldfinger. Omega watches, Sony phones, Heineken, Tom Ford suits all used Bond as a luxury symbol. Bond wasn't just cinema, he was advertising gold. Chapter 8.3 Bond at the Oscars. For decades, Bond films were box office hits, but award snubs. That changed in the 21st century. Major wins: Goldfinger 1964, Best Sound Effects, Skyfall 2012, Best Original Song Adele, Best Sound Editing, Spectre 2015, Best Original Song Sam Smith, Writings on the Wall. No Time to Die 2021, Best Original Song Billie Eilish. Page 2. Despite 25 films, Bond has never won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor. Chapter 8.4 Music, Themes, and Pop Culture. The James Bond theme, by Monty Norman, arranged by John Barry, is instantly recognizable. Legendary Bond themes: Goldfinger, Shirley Bassey, Live and Let Die, Paul McCartney and Wings, A View to a Kill, Duran Duran, Skyfall, Adele, No Time to Die, Billie Eilish. These songs reflect the tone of each Bond era, from the jazz age of Connery to the moody minimalism of Craig. Chapter 8.5 Global reach and cultural symbolism. Bond is British, but his appeal is global. Dubbed into 100+ languages, released in 170+ countries, used in tourism campaigns for the UK, Scotland, Italy, Jamaica, and more. Bond represents, Page 3, Cool Britannia, post-imperial elegance, a fantasy of competence, charm, and control. Chapter 8.6 Criticism and controversy. Bond has faced criticism, misogyny. Early Bonds treated women as disposable. Racism. Some films contain racial stereotypes and exoticism. Violence. Bond has killed over 400 people across 25 films. Modern films have tried to address this. Female characters with Agency Vesper Lynd, Moneypenny reboot, Madeline Swan. Craig's Bond expresses guilt, grief, and accountability. Chapter 8.7. Bond and the cultural conversation Bond reflects, Cold War anxiety from Russia with love, space race optimism, Moonraker, post-9/11 sphere, Casino Royale, surveillance and moral ambiguity Skyfall he influenced, fashion, tech obsession, masculinity ideals page for Chapter 8.8. Statistics that define 007 to 5 official Ian films, -6 actors so far, -100 plus Bond girls, 40 plus vehicles, 400 plus enemies killed, over 50 years of screen time, 3 Oscars for Best Original Song, 1 royal premiere for every film since 1965. Chapter 8.9. Beyond Film, Bond as a Multimedia Empire, novels by Kingsley Amis, John Gardner, Anthony Horowitz, comics, Daily Express strips, Dynamite series, games, GoldenEye 007, PlayStation, Xbox, merchandising, clothing, colognes, collectibles. Final narration. James Bond is more than a name. He's a number, a franchise, a phenomenon. He's billions in revenue, dozens of awards, endless debates. But perhaps the most remarkable number is this, page 51. There is only one James Bond, and as long as we crave style with danger, justice with wit, and mystery in a martini glass ... he'll always return. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Women of Bond, Romance, Power, and Critique. Approx 1850 words. Analytical, reflective, narrative tone narration begins. They're often called Bond girls. But behind the glamour ickiness and purring accents lies a deeper, more complex truth. From the moment Honey Rider walked out of the sea in Dr. No 1962, the women of Bond became icons. Not just of beauty, but of how cinema sees women, uses women, and ultimately evolves with them. This is not just a story of lovers and sidekicks. It's a chronicle of power, representation, tragedy, and transformation, because to understand Bond, you must understand the women who shaped him. Chapter 9.1. The birth of the Bond girl. In the early 1960s, female characters in film often existed to be rescued, romanced. Rewarded. Bond films didn't invent this formula, but they perfected it in Dr. No. Honey Rider. Ursula Andress emerges from the ocean in a white bikini holding seashells, unaware that she is stepping into cinematic history. She's beautiful, brave, but still positioned as secondary to Bond from the start. The Bond girl was physically stunning, enigmatic, often dangerous or mysterious. Usually doomed, betrayed, or discarded, she was part plot device, part fantasy. Chapter 9.2. The archetypes. Over the decades, Bond women generally fell into 3 categories. The ally lover works with Bond, usually a fellow spy or agent. Example, Anya Amasova, the spy who loved me, seen as Bond's equal until she falls for him. The femme fatale, beautiful but deadly loyal to the villain, or is she? Example, Xenia on a top GoldenEye, often killed or defeated in dramatic fashion. The damsel or victim, innocent in danger. Bond's job is to save her. Example, Solitaire, live and let die, frequently sexualized and disempowered. Chapter 9.3. Did Bond ever love? The answer is yes, but only rarely, and those moments define him. Tracy D. Vincenzo on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond marries her. She's intelligent, daring, emotionally grounded. She's murdered on their wedding day. Bond's last line, we have all the time in the world. Devastating. Vesper Lynd, Casino Royale. Craig's Bond falls hard. She's brilliant, complex, haunted. She betrays him, then dies. Her ghost shapes the entire Craig era. These 2 women scar Bond. They strip him of control. They make him human. Chapter 9.4. Behind the scripts. Writing. Women in Bond. For much of the franchise, women were written by men, often older, often writing from a male fantasy. This led to women with perfect bodies, but vague motivations, dialogue loaded with innuendo, character arcs ending with seduction or death. Examples, I think he got the point, said after impaling a villain. Characters named Pussy Galore, Plenty O'Toole, and Dr. Holly Goodhead. Funny, maybe, but also dated and increasingly criticized. Chapter 9.5. Feminist critique and public backlash. Starting in the 1980s, critics began asking, why are Bond women so disposable? Why does Bond seduce everyone he meets? Why do so many die immediately after sleeping with him? Feminist scholars saw Bond as a colonial male fantasy, a symbol of toxic masculinity, a relic of a sexist time. Audiences began noticing too. By the 2000s, social change demanded new kinds of women and a new kind of Bond. Chapter 9.6. The shift begins. The Brosnan era began the transformation. GoldenEye featured a female M. Judi Dench, who called Bond a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. Natalia, also in GoldenEye, was more than a love interest, she was a skilled programmer who saved the day. In Tomorrow Never Dies, Wai-Lin Michelle Yeoh was a martial arts expert and Chinese intelligence agent, not just a tag-along. These were signs of change, but the real shift came with Daniel Craig. Chapter 9.7, Craig Era, The Rise of the Complex Woman. The Craig films introduced the most developed women in Bond history. Vesper Lyndeva Green, not a Bond girl, a co-lead, outwits Bond financially, leaves a lasting emotional scar, humanizes him. M. Judi Dench, mother figure and authority. Dies in Skyfall, perhaps the emotional peak of the franchise, treats Bond as both weapon and wounded son. Madeline Swanley Seydoux, psychologist, independent, and recurring. The first woman Bond chooses to stay with, the mother of his child, a symbol of emotional growth. Craig's Bond wasn't just changed by women. He was redefined by them. Chapter 9.8, Women as Symbols of Change. The evolution of Bond women reflects shifts in society. Era, role of women 1960s-70s, objects of desire, plot devices 1980s, light agency, some moral conflict 1990s, beginning of depth and duality 2020s, co-protagonists, emotional anchors. This isn't accidental. Bond's writers and producers actively responded to cultural pressure. The #MeToo era demanded more respect, more nuance, less objectification. The result? Women in Bond films now have backstories, drive the plot, live beyond the bedroom, challenge Bond's ego. Chapter 9.9, So is Bond still problematic? Yes and no. Yes, his past is full of questionable behavior. He still seduces quickly, kills easily, and rarely says sorry. Many women still die or disappear after one film, but also no. He's shown growth, especially Craig's version. The franchise acknowledges and self-critiques. Women now have power, purpose, and personality. Bond's evolution is messy but necessary. He's not a role model, he's a mirror, and mirrors change as we do. Chapter 9.10, The Future of Women in Bond. What does the future hold? Will Bond ever be a woman? Will we get a female OO agent spin-off? No Time to Die teased this with Nomi, played by Lashana Lynch. Will love finally last? Fans are divided. Some want tradition. Others want revolution. But one thing is certain. Women will no longer be accessories in the Bond universe. They will be agents of action and emotion. And perhaps the next chapter of 007 will belong just as much to her as to him. Final narration, she walks into frame. Not behind him, not beside him, in front of him. Smart, armed, untouched by fear. This is the new Bond woman. Not a girl, not a fantasy, not a footnote, but a story of her own. Because in a world where danger evolves, so must desire. And as Bond learns to love, really love, perhaps we'll finally see the most dangerous thing of all, equality. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10, Gadgets, Cars, and Style. The signature tools of 007 narration begins. He walks into a room, every thread of his suit tailored to perfection. He raises an eyebrow, not a sweat. And when the odds turn deadly, he flicks a cufflink, presses a pen, or shifts a gear. And the impossible happens, because James Bond is never just a man. He's a weapon, a wardrobe, a mobile arsenal of elegance. This is the story of his most powerful allies, the gadgets, the cars, the style, and the people who made them. Chapter 10.1. The genius of Q Branch. Behind every gadget is Q, the head of MI6's research and development. Q, short for quartermaster, represents British ingenuity at its finest. Whether it's an exploding keychain or a submersible car, Q ensures Bond is always prepared. I never joke about my work. 007. From Desmond Llewellyn's iconic run 17 films to Ben Whishaw's modern tech-savvy Q, the character evolved. But the mission never changed. Anticipate threats, equip Bond with surprise tools, warn him not to break them, which of course he always does. Q Branch is where fantasy meets function. And in every generation, their gadgets reflect the tech dreams and fears of the time. Chapter 10.2. Legendary gadgets through the ages. Here's a look at some of the most unforgettable gadgets in Bond history. From Russia with Love 1963 briefcase, hidden knife, 50 gold sovereigns, tear gas. AR-7 rifle, first true spy gadget moment in the franchise. Goldfinger, 1960 for Aston Martin DB5 ejector seat, machine guns, oil slick bulletproof shield, the most iconic Bond car of all time. Thunderball, 1965. Jetpack, yes, a real working bell rocket belt, short, But unforgettable, The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977 Lotus Esprit turns into a submarine sea chases and underwater missile battles. GoldenEye, 1995 Parker. Pen grenade, click it 3 times to arm, 3 more to disarm. Classic tension builder. Skyfall, 2012. Only Bond can fire at palm-print lock pistol. Realistic grounded and modern. No Time to Die, 2021. Smart blood nanobots, microscopic killers programmed by DNA technology meets tragedy. From campy to chilling, Bond's gadgets always walk the line between science fiction and cutting-edge plausibility. Chapter 10.3. The car's speed, elegance, and escapes. If Bond had a true love, it might be his car more than just vehicles. Bond's cars are characters. They chase, fight, fly, swim, and sometimes explode spectacularly. The Kings of Bond Cars car film special features: Aston Martin DB5 gold finger ejector seat, revolving plates, guns. Lotus Esprit. The Spy Who Loved Me transforms into submarine. BMW Z8. The world is not enough missiles. Remote control. Aston Martin VAG-12 Vanquish. Die Another Day. Invisible camouflage. Controversial. Aston Martin DB10 Spectre custom built only for Bond. Bond's choice of car reflects his era. Connery's DB5 classy, tough. Morse Lotus flashy, futuristic. Brosnan's BMW globalized high-tech. Craig's Aston classic power, brutal elegance. Even car chases are different in Bond. Not just about speed, but strategy, gadgets, and survival. Chapter 10.4. The wardrobe. Dressing to kill. Bond suits are more than fashion, they're armor. Whether it's Tom Ford Brioni or Savile Row, Bond's tailoring always reflects control, confidence, deadly elegance. Key elements of Bond's look: midnight blue tuxedos, narrow lapel suits, crisp white shirts, Omega Seamaster watch, black leather gloves, signature sunglasses. Even when undercover, Bond never blends in. He walks into danger looking like he owns it, and yet his wardrobe never shouts. It whispers, "I'm prepared for anything." Chapter 10.5. The accessories of identity. More than gadgets or clothes, Bond's smaller habits define his persona. The martini, shaken not stirred, not just a drink. An attitude suggests refinement, precision, individuality. The watch Omega became Bond's official brand since GoldenEye 1995 often contains hidden tech, lasers, detonators, tracking devices. The Walther PPK standard issue since Dr. No, elegant, compact, deadly, a signature piece in posters and promo art. Cigarettes prominent in early films and novels, phased out in modern films for health image reasons. Everything Bond wears, carries, or drinks is a calculated part of his image. Each item tells a story. Chapter 10.6. How Bond's tools changed with time. Bond's gear evolved with technology and tone. Era gadgets, style, tone. 1960s analog tools, concealed weapons, classic tailoring, Cold War and trade. 1970s wild inventions, visual tricks, leisure suits, playful, colorful. 1980s realistic tools, toned down tech, more conservative espionage, realism. 1990s high-tech computers, flashy cars, modern luxury, action, blockbuster. 2000s DNA lock, surveillance, brutalist elegance, gritty, emotional. 2010s 2020s biotech, encryption. AI minimalist fashion, postmodern deconstruction. Bond's style reflects the world around him, but also helps shape it. In every film, he becomes the idealized version of what a man should be in that decade. Chapter 10.7. The Bond formula versus real spy tech. You might ask, are Bond's gadgets realistic? Sometimes yes, often not. Many inspired real-world innovation: GPS tracking, fingerprint scanning, weapons, drone surveillance, underwater propulsion units. Some, like the invisible car, remain absurdly fictional, but memorable. The line between science fiction and spy technology has always been thin, but Bond made one thing clear: tech must serve style, not the other way around. Chapter 10.8. The most iconic gadget scenes. Let's revisit some of the best gadget reveals. Goldfinger ejector seat. You're joking. I never joke about my work. 007 The Spy Who Loved Me. Underwater car. Audiences screamed in theaters. Bond's car drives off a pier, then swims like a fish. GoldenEye pen grenade, villain nervously clicking it back and forth. Tension and comedy fused. Skyfall personalized gun. Villain tries to use Bond's pistol, and it won't fire. These scenes aren't just thrilling, they're character moments to final narration. Bond never enters a mission empty-handed. His tools may be small pens, watches, buttons, but in his hands they become mythic. Each gadget is a promise, each car is a symbol, each suit, each accessory a reminder. Style is strength. Bond doesn't just rely on technology, he defines it. Because in the world of espionage, bullets may win battles, but taste wins legends. Chapter 11. Villains of Bond. From Dr. No to Safin, narration begins. James Bond is a man defined not only by his missions, but by those who stand in his way. From volcanic layers to cyber bunkers, from golden guns to nanobot swarms, Bond's villains are larger than life. Stylish, sinister, smart, but never, ever forgettable. They are the shadows to his light. And sometimes, they're not that different. Chapter 11.1 The Birth of the Bond Villain. Dr. No. It all began in 1962. Dr. Julius No wasn't just the first Bond villain, he set the template. Half German, half Chinese, metal hands, scientific genius, obsessed with revenge. He lived on a private island, plotted against the West, and underestimated Bond fatally. Dr. No introduced the Bond villain formula: exotic background, disfigurement or physical abnormality, elaborate lair, grandiose monologue, fatal flaw, arrogance. From that moment, the Bond villain became a cinematic archetype. Chapter 11.2 Blofeld and the Rise of Spectre. You can't talk Bond villains without Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Leader of Spectre, Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion, Blofeld is Bond's most iconic enemy. The blueprint for every evil mastermind trope, the inspiration behind Dr. Evil in Austin Powers appearing in multiple films. Blofeld evolved from Russia with Love 1963, Hidden in Shadows, You Only Live Twice 1967, Full Reveal, Bald, Scarred, and Stroking a White Cat on Her Majesty's Secret Service 1969, Kills Bond's Wife Spectre 2015, reintroduced as Bond's adoptive brother. Blofeld isn't just a villain, he's Bond's personal nemesis. A symbol of chaos wrapped in calm cruelty. Chapter 11.3 Classic Villains, Wealth, Power, Obsession. Several early villains weren't terrorists or ideologues, they were obsessive egomaniacs. Auric Goldfinger 1964, obsessed with gold, wants to irradiate Fort Knox instead of stealing it, ruthless and charming. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Carl Stromberg, The Spy Who Loved Me 1977, ocean fanatic who wants to destroy surface civilization and create an underwater utopia. Soft-spoken, megalomaniacal, Francisco Scaramanga, The Man with the Golden Gun 1974, each one a distorted reflection of Bond himself. Assassin with a Golden Pistol, Bond's mirror image, kills for money, style, and sport. Lives on a private island with traps and tech. These villains weren't just dangerous, they were obsessed with perfection, control, legacy. Chapter 11.4 Psychological Warfare. The modern villains, the 21st century gave us villains of the mind. Raul Silva, Skyfall 2012, former MI6 agent betrayed by M, turned cyber terrorist. Charismatic, broken, flamboyantly vengeful. His weapon isn't a laser, it's information. He hacks MI6, exposes secrets, and makes it personal. Loot Cypher Safin, No Time to Die 2021, biochemical engineer who uses nanobots to target DNA. Quiet, creepy, almost holy in demeanor. Plays God in silence. These villains represent digital age fears, global pandemic surveillance, and control moral ambiguity. They're not cartoonish, they're realistic nightmares. Chapter 11.5 Bond Shadow. Villain as mirror. Great villains in Bond don't just oppose him, they reflect him. Scaramanga, another assassin, another loner, but for profit, not Justice Silva. A spy abandoned by his country, what Bond could become. Lechifer, Casino Royale, gambler under pressure, desperate for a win, mirroring Bond's risk-taking. Blofeld. Same training, same roots, same trauma, but different choices. But where Bond is bound by duty, they are free to fall. Bond and his villains often dress alike, think alike, kill alike. Chapter 11.6 Real-world parallels. Villains reflecting their time era. Fear villain, 1960s Cold War. Nuclear threat, Dr. No. Blofeld, 1970s environmental apocalypse. Stromberg. Drax, 1980s drug trade. Proxy Wars, Sanchez, License to Kill, 1990s economic manipulation. Carver, Tomorrow Never Dies. 2000s terrorism, financial collapse. Lechifer, Green, 2010 cyber warfare. Betrayal. Silva, 2020s genetic warfare. Depersonalization. Saf. In Bond, villains are cultural diagnoses. They expose what we fear most, then turn it into plot. Chapter 11.7 The Villain's Toolkit. Tropes and traits. What makes a Bond villain? A Bond villain. Common traits: disfigurement or mark, eye scar, missing hand, facial burn, unique weapon or method. Golden Gun, Shark Tank, nanobots, lavish lair, volcano, space station, Arctic base. Global ambition: I want to start World War III, monologue before killing Bond. Impeccable taste: suits, art, architecture. They are not thugs. They are aristocrats of evil, and yet they always talk too long. Chapter 11.8 Fan favorites. Who are the greatest villains? According to polls and critics, the top Bond villains include Ernst Stavro Blofeld, iconic legacy, Raul Silva. Modern brilliance, Goldfinger. Pure greed, unforgettable lines, Scaramanga, elegant killer. Le Chiffre, calculated desperation, Alec Trevelyan 006 GoldenEye. Former friend turned foe, why do they stand out? They test Bond emotionally, not just physically challenge his morality, that they create stakes that go beyond the mission. Chapter 11.9. Are Bond villains changing? Yes, today's villains are less cartoonish, more psychologically damaged, more morally ambiguous, sometimes sympathetic. Audiences now expect motivation, not just menace, personal stakes. They have histories, pain, wounds. He wants to prove a point. Complexity. Villains like Silva, Safin, and even Blofeld Inspector aren't evil for the sake of it. In modern Bond, the villain doesn't just want to kill. Chapter 12. Bond Today. The future of 007 in a changing world. Narration begins. For over 6 decades, James Bond has ordered martinis, defeated villains, and saved the world, always in style. But in a world that's changing faster than ever, one question lingers: can James Bond survive the 21st century? Because today's world is not the same one Bond was born into. And if he wants to endure, he must evolve. This is the story of a legend standing at a crossroads. Chapter 12.1. The end of an era. Craig's final bow. No Time to Die 2021 marked the end of Daniel Craig's run as 007 and the end of a deeply personal Bond arc. Bond dies. He sacrifices himself to save Madeline and their daughter. For the first time ever, 007 doesn't walk away from the explosion. It was shocking, bold, controversial, but also fitting. Craig's Bond had already lost everything: Vesper M, his peace of mind, his purpose. By dying, he reclaimed agency over his fate. He became more than an assassin, he became a man. Chapter 12.2. Reinventing Bond. The challenge of the next 007. With Craig's departure, the franchise faced a massive question: who should be the next Bond? The debate exploded online. Should Bond be a person of color? Should Bond be a woman? Should Bond still drink, fight, flirt? Producers confirmed James Bond is male. But anyone can be 007. This left room for new agents to take the mantle like Nomi in No Time to Die, but still reserved the name James Bond for a man. It's a tightrope walk between tradition, representation, relevance. Chapter 12.3. A changing world. A changing hero. Bond was born in a post-World War II Britain, a time of fading empire and Cold War tension. But today, technology evolves by the second. Surveillance's global villains are no longer megalomaniacs, but silent algorithms, pandemics, and deepfakes. Gender dynamics have shifted. Cultural sensitivity is essential. So where does Bond fit? To survive, he must reflect the world we live in without losing the essence that made him iconic. Chapter 12.4. What makes Bond? Bond. Let's break it down. What are the non-negotiables? Element: must stake and change. Loyalty to MI6, yes. Calm under pressure, yes. Charm and wit, yes. Use of gadgets, yes. Gender debatable. Race, ethnicity open for change. Womanizer persona, no. Outdated. Excessive drinking, smoking, no. To be reduced. Bond doesn't need to be white, British born, or a womanizer anymore. He just needs to be skilled, composed, clever, driven, dangerous. Suave. Bond is a state of mind, not just a man in a tuxedo. Chapter 12.5. Representation. More than just a face. In recent years, films have faced pressure to reflect more diverse voices. Bond is no exception. Lashana Lynch played Nomi, the agent who takes the 007 title, while Bond is retired. Naomi Harris as Moneypenny brought depth and charisma. Jeffrey Wright as Felix Leiter gave American intelligence a grounded edge. These casting choices prove gives diversity in Bond doesn't weaken the brand, it strengthens it. Audiences want to see themselves on screen. Bond's world is finally beginning to look like the world outside the theater. Chapter 12.6. Bond vs. Modern franchises. Bond was once the king of cinematic espionage, but now, Mission Impossible delivers jaw-dropping stunts. John Wick brings raw, silent rage. Bourne changed spy action forever. Marvel dominates the cultural landscape to stay relevant. Bond needs bigger risks, deeper emotions, smarter scripts, innovation. Without gimmicks, audiences are smarter. They don't want formula, they want freshness. Chapter 12.7. What's next? Movies, series, or reboots? The future of Bond might not be on the big screen alone. Possibilities: TV series, Mi-6 missions from other agents. POV prequel series. Young Bond, Cold War spycraft anthology stories, one-off missions in different eras streaming specials, mini-missions for digital audiences. Producers Broccoli and Wilson insist, "We're not rushing the next Bond. It'll take time, because getting it wrong means losing what Bond stands for." Chapter 12.8. Can Bond be ethical in a post-#me-to world? This is the hardest question. Old Bond flirted recklessly, used women for intel, ignored consent, saw detachment as strength. Modern Bond shows vulnerability, listens, faces emotional consequences, respects boundaries, in No Time to Die. Bond chooses emotional honesty, respects no-me skills, sacrifices himself for love. That's progress. And the next Bond must continue it with actions, not just words. Chapter 12.9. What do fans want? Bond fans are passionate and divided. Some want a return to classic Bond charm, gadgets, action. Others want complete reinvention. Female Bond, darker tone. Most want a smart balance, a Bond who keeps his soul, but evolves with time. You can't please everyone, but you can respect everyone, and that may be Bond's greatest mission yet. Final narration. He stood in volcanoes, casinos, ice palaces, and train cars. He's loved, lost, and walked away from countless explosions. But now, he stands before us silent, waiting, ready to be reborn. Because James Bond isn't just a relic, he's a canvas, a myth made modern, a reflection of who we are and who we wish we could be. And as the curtain falls on one era, it rises on something new. Who he is next, that's up to us. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The End. And the Beginning. Why Bond endures. Narration begins. He walks into frame, cool, calm, armed with charm. A tuxedo, a martini, a gun, and the quiet confidence of a man who's faced the worst. And smiled back. James Bond, not just a character, not just a spy, but a legend that refuses to fade. For over 6 decades, through wars, revolutions, reboots, and reinventions, Bond remains. But why? Why does he still matter? Why do we still care? This is not just the end of our journey, it's the beginning of understanding why 007 endures. Chapter 13.1. The myth behind the man. Bond is more than a cinematic franchise. He's a modern myth, like Hercules with a license to kill. Created by Ian Fleming in 1953, Bond was cold-blooded, efficient, sophisticated, and deeply flawed. He drank too much. He trusted too little. He killed without hesitation. Yet, we watched him, admired him, imitated him. Why? Because Bond gave us a fantasy of control in a chaotic world. He always knew what to say, always had the right tool, always got the job done. Chapter 13.2. Bond through time. Adapting without breaking. The secret to Bond's longevity isn't in staying the same, it's in changing just enough. Era. The world. Bond adjustments. 1950s-60s Cold War paranoia, a ruthless, patriotic agent. 1970s glamour and space race, flashier, more fantastical. 1980s cynicism and realpolitik, grounded. Drug war realism. 1990s tech boom and globalization, sleek, gadget-heavy thrillers. 2000s post 9/11 sphere, brutal, emotional, stripped down. Bond 2010s-2020s identity, ethics, representation, vulnerable, self-aware, human. Bond changes with us yet remains himself. No matter the decade, he still walks into danger with a plan and a smirk. Chapter 13.3. Iconic by design. Elements that never die. So many heroes come and go, but Bond remains recognizable in a single silhouette. Why? Because he's built from timeless components. The tuxedo, the Walther PPK, the Aston Martin, the dry wit, the calm under pressure, the moral ambiguity, the courage to walk into fire and walk out alive. Strip away the explosions, and Bond is a personality, not a plot. We know how he moves, how he thinks, even how he drinks. He's not just watched, he's studied. Chapter 13.4. Bond's cultural legacy. The man who changed men. Bond shaped not only cinema, but manhood itself. He made confidence fashionable. He made elegance masculine. He made danger desirable. Because of Bond, men began wearing slim suits. Martini orders changed forever. Gadget dreams entered real life. R&D. The spy genre exploded globally, but the real influence was deeper. He showed that strength and silence could coexist, that charm could be deadlier than fists, that sophistication didn't mean softness. Bond became a blueprint, sometimes idealized, sometimes criticized, but always discussed. Chapter 13.5. From page to planet. Bond as global language. James Bond may have been born in the UK, but he belongs to the world. His stories have been dubbed in over 40 languages, filmed across more than 50 countries, watched by over 1 billion people from Tokyo to Cairo, Rio to Istanbul. People know the gun barrel intro, the theme, song, the line. Bond, James Bond. He is a cultural bridge between East and West, old and new, tradition and rebellion. In a divided world, Bond became a shared fantasy. Chapter 13.6 Bond and the Human Psyche. Psychologically, Bond satisfies something primal. He faces evil and wins. He's wounded, but keeps going. He walks into uncertainty but stays composed. He allows us to escape, but also to imagine who we could be if we were braver, cooler, calmer. Bond stories are about agency. When the world spins out of control, Bond keeps the wheel steady. He offers us power without chaos, style without vanity, violence with purpose, love with risk. He is not perfect, but that's why we return to him. Chapter 13.7 The Power of Endings and Rebirth. Every time Bond dies, he comes back. New face, new story, same spirit. His resilience mirrors our own. As the world falls apart, we rebuild. As fear rises, so does defiance. Bond is cinema's greatest phoenix. He's not eternal because he avoids death. He's eternal because he knows how to return. And as long as there's injustice, danger, and a mission to accept, Bond will be there. Final narration. Why Bond will never die? Because deep down, we all want to be the person who enters chaos with grace, faces death with humor, protects others without need for applause. Bond isn't about saving the world. He's about staying human while trying. That's why he still matters, not because of the explosions, but because, under the suit and the gun, is a man who refuses to let the world burn. So whether it's a man or woman, white or black, British or global, a Bond will continue. Different faces, different fears. Same mission: survive, protect, endure, because the world always needs a 007. End of Chapter 13 series complete.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of 007, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more Bond fans find this video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and tell me in the comments. What did you think of this analysis, and what would you like to see next in the world of cinema or any other topic you're passionate about?